The water was dark, murky with the weight of the storm that had been lingering over the valley for days. The river, swollen and relentless, twisted its way through the narrow gorge, churning with a violent energy. And then, amidst the roaring water, a small figure, vulnerable, desperate, emerged from the depths. A tiny dog, its fur sodden and clinging to its trembling frame, gasped for breath as it paddled furiously against the pull of the current. The air smelled thick with rain and earth, the scent of wet moss hanging in the heavy silence after each wave crashed. It wasn't the river's roar that haunted the stillness now. It was the soft whimpers of the animal, too exhausted to keep fighting but too scared to surrender. On the bank, Anna's heart pounded. She had been walking along the trail, wrapped in her own thoughts, when she heard the faintest cry. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then came another sound, a desperate bark. She turned and there it was, a blur of fur being swept away by the current. Without thinking, she sprinted. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to save herself from what seemed like certain doom. But there was no time. The pup needed her. With each step, her breath became shallow, her legs like lead, and the roaring water seemed to mock her, daring her to try and save the life that was slipping away. Her heart raced as her eyes locked on the helpless creature, now tumbling beneath the waves, struggling to keep its head above the water. And then, something shifted in the air, a moment suspended between the impossible and the inevitable. Anna dove. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. Anna had always found solace in nature, but today the river seemed as restless as her own mind. The clouds hung heavy, the air thick with the damp scent of rain-soaked earth. The world felt like it was holding its breath, as if it too was waiting for something to break. Anna's steps were slow, deliberate, as she walked along the riverbank, hoping that the tranquil rhythm of nature would soothe the gnawing ache in her chest. Her life had recently been turned upside down, losses too deep to name, a relationship that had crumbled like dust between her fingers. She had tried to leave it all behind, walking miles into the wilderness, hoping the solitude would help her forget. Yet the ache remained, tucked into the corners of her heart, reminding her that she was not as strong as she once thought. As she moved further along the riverbank, a faint sound caught her attention. At first, she thought it was just the wind whispering through the trees. But then, it came again, a small, desperate bark. Her heart stuttered in her chest. It was coming from the water. She turned and scanned the river. The swirling current was powerful, relentless, pulling everything in its path. And then, she saw it. A tiny form, struggling against the water, its little legs paddling frantically to stay above the surface. A dog. The moment stretched on frozen. Anna's legs felt heavy, her body rooted to the spot. The current was too strong and the dog seemed so small, so helpless. She wondered if anyone would have the courage to try and save it. The river had claimed so many lives. Why should this one be any different? But then, the dog's eyes locked onto hers, filled with a kind of silent desperation, and Anna felt something stir deep inside her. This wasn't just any dog. This was a life, a soul that needed saving. Without thinking, without hesitation, she ran. The rocks beneath her feet were slippery, the river's roar deafening in her ears, but Anna didn't care. She only cared about the small creature being swept away. She reached the edge of the water, her breath coming in sharp gasps, and stretched out her hand toward the dog. The current was too strong, and for a split second, she feared that she would lose her footing and be pulled into the water herself. But she couldn't back down. She couldn't watch this helpless creature drown. With every ounce of her being, Anna dove into the river. The shock of the cold water hit her like a blow to the chest, and for a moment she struggled to breathe. But there was no time to panic. She kicked her legs, pushing herself through the water, toward the tiny dog that had just disappeared under the surface. She found it again, its small body still moving, but slower now, exhausted from fighting the current. Anna reached out and grabbed it, holding it close to her chest as she struggled to keep her head above the water. The dog's frantic paddling calmed for a moment, its eyes wide and filled with fear, but there was also something else. A kind of trust, a silent understanding that it was no longer alone. The river was powerful and the current was unforgiving. Anna's arms burned with the effort of swimming, her legs heavy and weak from the cold. She couldn't keep fighting the river forever. She could feel her strength waning, her body slowly giving up, but she refused to let go of the dog. She couldn't. As the minutes stretched on, her mind began to wander. She thought of the choices she had made in her life, how she had walked away from the people she loved, how she had failed to protect them, how she had let the storm inside her rage uncontrollably. Was she any different from this dog, struggling to survive, trying to stay afloat in a world that didn't seem to care? The thought hit her like a wave, but she shoved it aside. The dog was in her arms now. She couldn't afford to give in to the darkness. She had to keep going. With one final surge of strength, Anna felt the pull of the river lessening. She could feel the ground beneath her feet, the slippery rocks giving way to solid earth. The water was still rushing around her, but she was no longer being pulled under. She was going to make it. She stumbled, breathless and gasping, pulling herself and the dog out of the water. The world felt heavy, the air thick with the scent of rain and earth. She lay on the shore, the small dog in her arms, both of them trembling with exhaustion. In that moment, as the sound of the river faded and the storm began to break, Anna realized something. She had fought the river, yes, but she had also fought herself. She had found strength in the face of despair, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something she had long forgotten, hoped. Anna felt the dog's small, trembling body in her arms as she lay on the wet, rocky shore. The adrenaline from the rescue was wearing off, and all that remained was exhaustion, an all-consuming, bone-deep fatigue. Her muscles ached and her head spun as she tried to catch her breath. She was acutely aware of the dog's weight, its wet fur clinging to her skin. But it was comforting. The struggle wasn't over, but for the first time in what felt like years, Anna was doing something real. Something that mattered. The dog's soft whimpers broke the silence, and Anna's heart clenched. She stroked its fur gently, trying to comfort it as best she could. She wasn't sure if it was in shock, or if it was just too tired to move, but it clung to her, trusting her for its survival. She couldn't let go. The storm had passed, but the sky remained overcast, heavy with the promise of more rain. The air was thick, and every breath felt like it was dragging something deep inside her. The scent of the wet earth, the sound of the distant river, and the soft rustle of the trees were all she could hear. It was as if the world had quieted down for her. But then, a sharp cramp shot through her leg, and the peaceful stillness of the moment was shattered. Anna gasped in pain, feeling her muscles tighten as if they were being pulled in every direction. She gritted her teeth, trying to steady herself, but the pain was overwhelming. Her body was refusing to cooperate. She couldn't afford to collapse, not now. She had to get them both to safety. She had to keep going. The thought of the river, of how close they had come to being swept away, pushed her forward. Anna struggled to her feet, her legs trembling beneath her. The dog, still huddled in her arms, was silent now, as though it too knew they weren't out of danger yet. The path ahead seemed endless, the wet earth beneath her feet making each step feel like a struggle. Anna had been through a lot in her life, but this moment, this fight, was different. The emotional and physical weight of the rescue was starting to set in. Her body screamed for rest, but there was no time. She had to make sure the dog was okay, that they both survived. Every step felt like an eternity, the pain in her body intensifying with every movement. She couldn't see past the fog of exhaustion, couldn't focus on anything other than the next step, the next breath. It was as if the world had become a blur of pain and desperation. But then, she felt the dog stir in her arms, its small body moving against her chest. Anna stopped in her tracks, a strange sense of warmth filling her chest. The dog was still alive, still with her. The feeling of its tiny heart beating against hers gave her the strength to push forward. It was as though they were feeding off each other's will to survive. The landscape around them seemed to shift, the trees growing taller and more sparse, the ground less treacherous. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. Anna felt a shift within herself as well. A flicker of something that wasn't just survival. It was something deeper, something that made her realize that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as she thought. She wasn't just rescuing the dog anymore. She was rescuing herself. But the journey wasn't over, and there would be more challenges ahead. The storm had passed, but the emotional and physical toll of the rescue was only just beginning to show. The river had taken so much from Anna, her peace, her strength, her hope. But in the depths of her exhaustion, she found something she hadn't known was there, a fierce will to survive. Holding the dog in her arms, she could feel its tiny body still trembling, but there was a warmth now, a connection that tethered them both to this moment, this fight. The exhaustion of the rescue was catching up to her, but there was something primal in her now, a desire to keep going, to push through, to not let either of them be claimed by the dark river that had almost swallowed them whole. Anna took a deep breath, pushing her shoulders back as if to shake off the weight of the world that had been pressing on her for so long. The dog in her arms was lighter now, no longer struggling to stay afloat, its body more relaxed. That gave her some small sense of relief. She wasn't sure how long they had been out in the storm, how long she had been fighting against the river's relentless pull, but the heavy silence around them was broken only by the sound of her breathing and the occasional rustle of the dog's fur as it nestled closer to her chest. The forest around her was still damp with the rain that had fallen, the earth soft beneath her feet. She took another step, wincing as the cramp in her leg shot up again. Her muscles felt like they had been carved from stone, stiff and aching, but she didn't dare stop. She couldn't. The dog's life depended on it. She didn't know if it was the adrenaline still coursing through her veins or the quiet but constant ache in her chest, but she moved forward. Her steps were shaky, but they were steady, and that was enough. The trail ahead was unclear. The trees, their leaves glistening with droplets, lined the path like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with the weight of the storm. Anna wasn't sure where she was headed, only that she had to keep moving. She had to find help for the dog. Her mind raced with thoughts of what might happen if she didn't get it to safety. The dog was small, so fragile. The cold had already sapped most of its energy. She could feel its heartbeat slow in her arms, and for a moment a pang of panic gripped her chest. Was she too late? Had the storm already taken its toll? The thought almost paralyzed her. But she couldn't let that happen. She couldn't let it die. Not like this. Not when she was so close. Anna stopped for a brief moment to catch her breath. She glanced down at the dog in her arms. Its eyes were barely opened, but they locked onto hers with an expression that was almost grateful, as though it knew that she was the reason it had made it out of the water alive. In that moment, Anna wasn't just saving a life. She was witnessing the kind of raw vulnerability that only comes from facing the worst of circumstances and emerging with the slimmest shred of hope. The dog's struggle was her struggle, its fight for survival mirrored in her own battle with grief and loss. Anna's thoughts shifted back to the events that had brought her here, to this point. The heartbreak she had been running from, the silent anger she'd carried inside her for years. Loss, betrayal, the feeling of being abandoned by the very people who were supposed to be her foundation. She had buried all of that beneath a smile, beneath the get-over-it mentality that was so often preached to those in pain. But in this moment, standing alone in the wilderness with a small, fragile creature clinging to her, Anna felt it all unravel. She wasn't just trying to save the dog, she was trying to save herself. The path ahead grew steeper, and Anna's legs felt like lead. Her breath came in shallow bursts, and the sharpness of her exhaustion threatened to overtake her. Her body screamed for relief, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she had come this far. The weight of the dog in her arms, though lighter than it had been, seemed to grow heavier with every step. She could feel its body shaking, but it was no longer a frantic tremor. It was a quiet surrender, as if it too understood the exhaustion of survival. The world around her began to blur, the green of the trees and the gray of the sky blending into a dizzying haze. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with moisture, clinging to her skin, soaking into her clothes. Her clothes, once dry and neat, were now clinging to her body in uncomfortable layers, a reminder of the storm and the journey she had just undertaken. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts, fear for the dog, concern for herself, the haunting question of whether they would ever truly be okay again. How long could she keep fighting like this? How much longer could she push herself before her body completely gave out? The uncertainty of it all was suffocating. But there was one thing she knew for sure: she wouldn't let go of the dog. She wouldn't leave it to die. And then, in a moment of clarity, she realized something. This wasn't just about the dog. This was about her. This was her redemption. She had spent so long running from her pain, hiding from the feelings that had weighed her down. But in this moment she was forced to confront them. She was forced to face the rawness of her grief, her anger, her guilt. And she realized something profound. By saving the dog, by choosing to fight for it, she was choosing to fight for herself too. The dog stirred slightly, its eyes fluttering open, and Anna felt a small spark of hope. The dog's resilience, its unwillingness to give up, was contagious. She could feel it, that quiet strength, that tiny heartbeat pulsing with life, reminding her that survival wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about will. It was about determination. And in this moment, both she and the dog had that in abundance. Anna's legs trembled, but she pressed on. The ground was uneven now, the path narrowing as the trees thickened around them. She could see a faint glow of light breaking through the canopy above, a sign that she was nearing the edge of the forest. The end of the trail was within reach. She just had to make it. Her body screamed for rest, but her will was unwavering. The dog's body, so fragile in her arms, was her anchor, pulling her forward. Each step felt like a victory, a small triumph over the exhaustion and doubt that had consumed her. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stop until she had reached safety, until she had given the dog a chance to live. And then, just as her legs were about to give way, she saw it, a clearing up ahead, a house. The faint light of a porch lamp flickered in the distance. Anna's heart surged with relief and she pushed forward, her steps quickening despite the pain that coursed through her body. As she reached the clearing, the warmth of the house seemed to beckon her, offering the safety and comfort she so desperately needed. The door opened and a figure stepped out, an older woman, a veterinarian, Anna would later find out. The woman's eyes widened in surprise as she saw Anna, her clothes soaked, her face pale and tired, but with the dog still clutched in her arms, alive, breathing, and safe. Anna collapsed into the woman's arms, her body giving way to the relief of knowing they had made it. The fight was over, she had saved the dog, and in doing so, she had saved herself. The warmth of the house enveloped Anna like a comforting embrace, a stark contrast to the chill of the river, and the weight of the emotional storm she had been battling for weeks. As she collapsed into the chair near the hearth, her body trembling from exhaustion, the veterinarian who had opened the door immediately took charge. The dog, wrapped in a warm towel, was carefully placed on a soft blanket, its shivering body finally beginning to relax as the warmth seeped into its bones. But Anna didn't have the luxury of focusing on the dog alone. Her own body was screaming in protest, muscles aching with every movement. She had given so much of herself in that river, and now that she was safe, now that the immediate threat was gone, the toll it had taken on her became undeniable. Her head spun, her legs felt like jelly, and all she wanted was to sink into the softness of the chair, to close her eyes and forget about everything. But the quiet of the room made it impossible to escape the thoughts that had been swirling around in her mind for what felt like forever. The veterinarian, a woman with kind eyes and the steady hands of someone who had seen more than her share of desperate situations, moved around the room preparing the necessary equipment to check the dog. Anna couldn't help but notice the calmness with which she worked. Her movements were precise, practiced, everything Anna wasn't. She wanted to just sit there, to let the woman take care of everything, but the realization hit her with brutal clarity. She had been running from things for too long. She had been hiding from herself, from her grief, from the loss that had crushed her spirit. She had avoided it, pushed it deep inside, thinking it would go away, but it hadn't. It was still there, and the dog, this small creature that had clung to her for life, had somehow brought it all to the surface. The woman, noticing the way Anna's hands trembled slightly as she ran them through her wet hair, paused and offered a gentle smile. "You did a good thing," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The pup is lucky you found it." Anna nodded, but the words didn't comfort her. She had done what anyone would have done. She hadn't rescued the dog out of some heroic impulse. It was something deeper, something more desperate. The same way she had tried to rescue herself from the wreckage of her own life, from the heartbreak and regret that clung to her like the damp clothes she now peeled away. She shifted in the chair, trying to get comfortable, but her mind refused to stop. It always seemed to return to one thing: the reason she was in this situation to begin with. Why had she been so numb for so long? The loss of her relationship, the feeling of abandonment, it all weighed on her. The grief that had been festering inside her, buried beneath the surface, now made itself known, and Anna couldn't hide from it anymore. Her eyes flickered to the dog, now lying comfortably on the blanket, its breathing slow and steady. The animal was fragile, yet there was a resilience in it, a quiet strength that reminded Anna of her own inner fight. The dog had clung to life against the current, even when it seemed like there was no hope. And Anna had done the same, clinging to something, anything, that could give her purpose, could give her a reason to keep moving forward. But now, in the silence of the room, with the dog safe and sound, she was forced to confront the truth. The dog was healing physically, but Anna wasn't sure she could say the same for herself. She had survived the storm, but it felt like a hollow victory. The pain inside her hadn't gone away. The scars, the emotional wounds were still there, still raw. She had been so focused on saving the dog that she had forgotten about herself, forgotten that she, too, needed saving. The veterinarian returned to her side, sitting down across from her with a cup of warm tea in her hands. The kindness in her eyes was unmistakable, but Anna could feel the weight of her own guilt pressing in. She felt like an imposter, like she didn't belong in this place of safety and warmth. She had no idea what it meant to truly heal. She had no idea how to move forward from the grief that had wrapped itself around her heart like a vice. "Is the dog going to be okay?" Anna finally asked, her voice softer than she intended. The woman gave a reassuring smile, nodding. "It's a fighter. You did a great job. It'll take a little time, but I think it's going to make a full recovery." She paused before adding, "You know, sometimes the ones who fight the hardest are the ones who need the most healing." Anna felt the weight of those words settle over her, the meaning sinking deep into her bones. She had been fighting, too. Fighting her grief, fighting her sense of abandonment, fighting the dark thoughts that threatened to consume her. But she had never truly given herself permission to heal. She had never allowed herself the space to grieve, to feel the pain without hiding behind a facade of strength and self-reliance. The woman's words echoed in her mind. The ones who fight the hardest are the ones who need the most healing. Anna realized with a sharp pang that it was true. She had been fighting for so long, not only for her own survival but also for the illusion of control. But in the process, she had neglected the one thing that could help her heal, her own ability to feel. The room was quiet again, save for the sound of the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Anna stared into the flames, her thoughts swirling as she tried to reconcile the person she had been with the person she was becoming. Could she truly heal from the wounds of her past? Could she allow herself to be vulnerable, to let go of the pain that had held her captive for so long? The dog, now curled up on the blanket, let out a soft whimper and shifted slightly. Anna smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest as the small creature seemed to find a moment of peace. She looked at the veterinarian, who had returned to tending to the pup, and felt a sense of gratitude toward her, toward this woman who had reminded her that healing didn't come from ignoring pain. It came from facing it head-on, acknowledging it, and slowly, one step at a time, allowing it to release its grip. Anna stood up slowly, her legs still weak but her resolve stronger than it had been in weeks. She moved to the window and looked outside. The storm had passed, and the world seemed quieter, gentler. The trees were no longer bent in the fury of the wind. They stood tall and resolute, their leaves glistening in the soft light of the setting sun. In that moment, Anna realized something. She wasn't going to heal overnight. It wasn't going to be easy. But the first step was admitting the pain, allowing herself to feel it, and choosing to move forward. She wasn't going to fight the storm anymore. She was going to embrace it, let it wash over her, and allow it to guide her towards something new. She turned back to the veterinarian and the dog, feeling a sense of peace settle in her chest for the first time in what felt like forever. She wasn't alone, and neither was the dog. They were both on a journey, one of healing and growth, and together, they would find their way. The air was fresher today, softer than it had been in weeks, as if the earth itself was recovering from the storm. The heavy clouds had dispersed, leaving behind a pale blue sky that stretched endlessly overhead, bright with the first warmth of the sun. Anna stood at the edge of the small porch of the veterinarian's home, the soft hum of the wind rustling through the trees filling the silence. In the distance, she could hear the gentle gurgling of the river, its roar subdued after the storm, as if it had softened in deference to the peace that had finally settled over the land. The house was quiet now, save for the occasional creak of the old wood beneath her feet and the soft patter of the dog's paws as it explored the space inside. It had made a remarkable recovery. Just the day before, it had been curled up in Anna's arms, weak and trembling, barely able to lift its head. But now the little dog was moving around with curiosity, sniffing at corners and wagging its tail whenever it caught Anna's eye, as if to say thank you in its own way. Anna smiled as she watched it. her heart warmed by the dog's resilience. It was an unexpected companion, but in many ways it felt like the perfect one. The dog had been through its own battle, its own near-death experience, yet it had come through still alive, still fighting. And now, just like Anna, it was learning to trust again. It was learning how to live after the storm. As she stood there, the sunlight dappling across her face, Anna's mind drifted to the past few days. The long, exhausting journey that had begun when she saw the dog struggling in the river, and how it had somehow become the catalyst for everything that had happened since. In rescuing the dog, she had unknowingly started a process of self-rescue. The weight of the loss she had been carrying for so long had slowly begun to lift. There was a clarity she had never had before, a new perspective on life that wasn't tainted by grief or regret. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she had a purpose again. It was strange how something as simple as saving a life could change everything. But Anna had come to understand that it wasn't just about the act itself. It was about the choices she had made since then, the way she had allowed herself to feel the pain and embrace the healing that followed. She had spent so long running from her emotions, trying to ignore the wounds that had festered for years. But in the quiet of this small house, with the dog at her side, she had found a new way of living. She didn't need to hide anymore. The veterinarian had been kind but firm in her advice. "You've done more for this dog than you realize," she had said the night before, as she had gently bandaged the dog's paw. "But you also need to take care of yourself. Healing is a journey. Don't forget that." Anna had nodded at the time, but her thoughts had been elsewhere. Now, as the sunlight warmed her skin, she understood the depth of those words. Healing was not just about saving the dog. It was about saving herself. It was about allowing herself the space to breathe, to grieve, to let go of the burdens she had carried for so long. She couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The journey ahead would require courage, vulnerability, and patience, not just with the dog, but with herself. With a deep breath, Anna turned back toward the house. The dog had wandered to the corner of the room, its small body curled up on a cushion, its tail wagging contentedly as it lay in the warmth of the fire that crackled softly in the hearth. Anna moved closer, kneeling beside the dog. It lifted its head to meet her gaze, its eyes full of trust and quiet affection. She reached out and gently stroked its fur, feeling a sense of peace wash over her as she did. "You're a fighter," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. "We both are." The dog let out a soft whine, as if it understood, and nuzzled her hand in response. In that moment, Anna knew that the bond between them went far beyond the river, beyond the storm. They had both been through something that had threatened to break them. But they had survived, and together they would heal. The days that followed were filled with a quiet rhythm. The veterinarian continued to check on the dog, ensuring that it was recovering fully while Anna helped out around the house. At first, the work felt foreign, feeding the dog, caring for its wounds, making sure it was comfortable. But as the days passed, it became a routine that grounded her. There was something profoundly comforting about caring for another being, about nurturing it back to health. She had spent so long neglecting her own well-being, but now in caring for the dog, she had a reason to take care of herself too. The quiet mornings were filled with gentle tasks: feeding the dog, cleaning the small cottage, tending to the garden outside. The evenings, however, were the hardest. In the silence that came with the setting sun, Anna found herself thinking more and more about the life she had left behind. The relationship that had ended in heartbreak, the friends she had distanced herself from, the memories that were so tied to the past, to the life she once had but could no longer return to. It felt like a weight, one she had carried for far too long, and yet she wasn't sure how to let it go. But every time the dog curled up beside her, its head resting on her lap, every time it nuzzled her hand with quiet affection, she was reminded that healing was a process, not an event. It wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It was about taking small steps forward, one day at a time, until the past no longer held the same weight. That afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Anna found herself at the edge of the small garden, looking out at the vast expanse of land before her. The sky had turned a soft orange, the fading light casting long shadows across the fields. She breathed in deeply, feeling the coolness of the evening air, and let the moment settle around her. The dog came bounding over to her, its tail wagging energetically, as if it wanted to share this peaceful moment with her. Anna smiled, crouching down to greet it, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something shift inside her. It was as if the weight of the past no longer consumed her. She could feel it, the gradual release, the lifting of the burden she had carried for so long. She stood, looking out at the horizon, the vastness of the world before her, and realized something: she had a choice. The river, the storm, the pain. None of it had to define her anymore. She had the power to move forward, to step into the unknown and create something new. It wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer afraid. "Let's go," she whispered to the dog, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "We have a lot of life to live." The morning light poured in through the window, casting a soft, golden glow across the small cottage. The fire had died down, leaving only the quiet hum of the house to fill the space. Anna sat at the wooden table, a cup of tea warming her hands as she stared out the window. The dog, now fully recovered, lay curled up on the rug, its tail occasionally wagging in its sleep. The peace of the moment felt fragile, like a delicate breath that could break at any second. It had been days since the storm had passed, since the rescue, and yet Anna couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something deeper, something she couldn't quite understand. Her thoughts turned inward, as they often did in the quiet moments. It wasn't just the storm that had changed her. It was everything that had come before it. The years of numbing herself to the world, of pretending she was fine when she was anything but. She had spent so long burying the pain, pushing it to the back of her mind, telling herself that if she just kept moving forward, it would all go away. But it hadn't. The pain had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break through. And now, as she sat in this peaceful little house, with the dog at her side, Anna realized that the moment had come. She couldn't hide from it anymore. She had been running from her past for too long, but the river, the storm, and this dog had forced her to confront it. The act of saving the dog, of facing the river's relentless current, had become a metaphor for everything she had avoided in her life. She had fought to survive, to pull the dog out of the water, just as she had fought to survive the heartbreak, the loss, and the deep-seated grief that had threatened to drown her for so long. Anna's mind wandered to the days before the storm, the days when everything had seemed so much simpler. She had been in a relationship once, a relationship that she had thought was meant to last forever. They had shared dreams, plans, and promises. They had built a life together. But somewhere along the way, something had gone wrong. She didn't know exactly when it had happened, only that one day she woke up and realized that they had drifted apart. The love that had once been so strong had faded, and in its place was something unfamiliar, something broken. It wasn't just the relationship that had left her broken. It was the way she had been left behind, the way she had been abandoned without a second thought. There was a sharp pain in her chest as she remembered the night they had finally ended things. He had packed his bags, his face hard and unreadable, and walked out the door without a single word of explanation. Anna had stood there, in the empty silence of their apartment, feeling as if the ground beneath her had just disappeared. The life they had built together had crumbled in an instant, and she had been left to pick up the pieces. It was a pain she had buried deep inside herself, a pain that had become a weight on her shoulders, an invisible burden that she had carried with her every day. She had tried to move on, to forget, but the wounds never fully healed. The scar tissue was there, always present, always reminding her of the loss, of the betrayal. But now, sitting in this small cottage, with the dog resting peacefully by her side, Anna realized something important. She wasn't the same woman she had been when the relationship ended. She had changed. She had survived the storm, not just the one that raged outside, but the one that had torn apart her life years ago. The storm had left her broken, but it had also made her stronger. It had taught her that survival wasn't just about keeping your head above water. It was about learning to embrace the pain, to face it, and to grow from it. Anna closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her past. For so long, she had been afraid to acknowledge the hurt, afraid to face the parts of herself that still carried the scars of her failed relationship. But now, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel the grief, the loss, the anger. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. She had been running from it for so long, but now she had no choice but to face it head on. The dog stirred, lifting its head and looking at her with those wide, trusting eyes. Anna smiled, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. The dog had been through its own battle, its own trauma, and yet here it was, sitting by her side, offering nothing but unconditional love and trust. It was a reminder that healing wasn't just about fixing the broken pieces. It was about learning to trust again, about finding the strength to move forward, no matter how difficult it might be. Anna stood up, feeling the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. The pain was still there, still a part of her, but it no longer had the power to control her. She had learned that healing wasn't a destination. It wasn't a moment when everything would be perfect again. It was a journey, one that required patience, understanding, and, most importantly, forgiveness. As the dog bounded over to her, tail wagging excitedly, Anna reached down and picked it up, holding it close. The bond between them was stronger now, forged in the fire of their shared experiences. They had both been through their own storms, their own struggles, and now they were learning to live again. "I think we're going to be okay," Anna whispered to the dog, her voice steady with a new sense of hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that she had the strength to face it. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. The dog licked her face, its small tongue warm and soft against her skin. Anna laughed softly, feeling the weight of the past slip away with each passing moment. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was enough. For the first time in a long while, Anna felt like she was moving forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the world outside, Anna stood at the window looking out at the vast open sky. The river was calm now, its once turbulent waters flowing peacefully, as if it, too, had found a sense of calm. The past was still there, still a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about finding peace with the parts of herself that had been broken and learning to live with them. And as she stood there holding the dog close, Anna felt something new beginning inside her. It was the first spark of a new life, one filled with hope, possibility, and the quiet knowledge that no matter what had happened in the past, she was ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun was barely visible through the thin mist that hung low over the landscape, casting a soft, diffused light across the garden outside. Anna sat on the porch, the wooden steps cold against her legs, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. It had become a quiet routine mornings with the dog, sipping tea while watching the world wake up. There was a peaceful rhythm to it now, a steadiness she hadn't realized she needed until she found herself in this small cottage, far from the chaos that had once consumed her life. The dog, now more energetic than ever, trotted around her feet, its tail wagging with excitement as it pounced on the grass, chasing after an imaginary butterfly. The sight of its small body darting through the morning dew filled Anna with a quiet joy. She had saved this little creature from the river, from the cold and the storm, and yet it had given her so much more than she could have ever anticipated. The bond between them was undeniable, growing stronger each day. The dog had come into her life at a time when she had been at her lowest, when she had felt broken and alone, and now it had become her constant companion, her anchor in the stillness of this new beginning. She had expected to save it, to be the one to offer shelter and protection, but in many ways it had saved her too. Its loyalty, its innocent trust, had begun to heal the part of her that had been bruised by the betrayal of her past. As the dog bounded over to her, resting its paws on her lap, Anna couldn't help but laugh softly. "You've got too much energy for one little creature," she said, her voice a gentle whisper that was swallowed by the morning air. The dog looked up at her, its eyes wide and full of wonder, its ears perked up with a sense of eager curiosity. Anna reached down, scratching behind its ears, the warmth of its small body a reminder that, despite the weight of everything that had come before, life was still worth living. The dog's soft, trusting gaze made her feel seen, not for the woman who had lost everything, but for the woman she was becoming, a woman who was learning to live again. But the peace she had found here wasn't without its challenges. As the days passed, there were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of her past would return to haunt her. She had tried to move forward, to let go of the memories that had been so tightly woven into the fabric of her life. But the past was stubborn. It didn't simply fade away. She remembered the days before the storm, before the river, when she had tried to convince herself that she was fine. She had kept herself busy, focused on work, on the small tasks of everyday life, but it had never been enough. The loneliness, the pain, the feeling of being abandoned. It had always been there, just beneath the surface, waiting for a crack to appear. The dog, sensing her shift in energy, nudged her hand with its head, a silent reminder that it was here, that it was always here, offering its companionship without expectation. Anna smiled, grateful for its presence, and gently picked it up, holding it close. The bond between them wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper, something unspoken that had been forged in the quiet spaces between their shared experiences. As the dog nestled into her arms, Anna's thoughts drifted to the future. It had only been a few weeks since the storm, but she could feel the change inside her. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. There were no grand, sweeping gestures or revelations. It was more subtle, more gradual. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had lessened, softened by time and the small acts of kindness that had come into her life. She had learned, through the dog's eyes, that healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that unfolded slowly, one step at a time. It was about learning to be patient with herself, to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made, and to accept that she couldn't control everything. The past was a part of her, but it didn't have to define her. The dog, now content in her arms, let out a soft sigh, closing its eyes as if it had found its own moment of peace. Anna closed her eyes too, feeling the quiet hum of the world around her, the rustling of the leaves in the wind, the distant chirp of birds, the soft crackle of the fire inside the cottage. It was all so peaceful, so still, and yet, within that stillness, Anna could feel the stirrings of something new. She wasn't the same woman she had been before the river, before the storm. The grief was still there, lurking in the background, but it no longer consumed her. She had learned to live with it, to accept it, and to move forward in spite of it. And with the dog by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. But it wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about growth. The bond between Anna and the dog had been forged in the crucible of survival, but it was evolving now. It was no longer just about the act of saving the dog. It was about what they could become together. They were no longer two separate beings struggling to survive. They were a team. Two souls who had found a connection in the unlikeliest of circumstances. As the dog snuggled closer, its small body pressing against her side, Anna realized something important. Survival was no longer enough. She wasn't just trying to make it through another day, another week. She was beginning to want more. She wanted to live. She wanted to experience the world with all its beauty and its pain, with all its joy and sorrow, because she knew now that it was all part of the journey. The sun was rising higher in the sky, the warmth of its rays soaking into the earth, bringing with it a sense of renewal. Anna stood up slowly, the dog still nestled in her arms, and walked toward the garden. It was time for a new chapter. She had survived the storm, and now she was ready to step into the world again. It wasn't going to be easy, and she didn't have all the answers, but she was no longer afraid. The dog squirmed in her arms, eager to explore, to chase after the next adventure, and Anna smiled, letting it down onto the grass. It bounded away, tail wagging, chasing after a butterfly that fluttered past. For a moment, Anna just watched, feeling the joy of the dog's unrestrained happiness fill her own heart. "Come on," she called gently, watching the dog's ears perk up at the sound of her voice. "Let's go see what the world has in store for us today." And with that, the two of them, one human, one dog, stepped forward into the morning light, ready to face whatever came next together. The days had slowly begun to blend into one another. The mornings were filled with the quiet hum of routine, feeding the dog, tending to the small garden outside, and brewing tea on the old stove. The cottage had become a sanctuary for Anna, a space where the noise of the world seemed muffled, and the weight of her past felt just a little lighter. But even in this peaceful solitude, there were moments when Anna's mind would drift back to the life she had left behind, to the choices she had made and the mistakes that still lingered in the shadows. As the dog slept soundly at her feet, Anna sat by the window, staring out at the vast landscape that stretched before her. The river, once a symbol of chaos and fear, now seemed calm, its waters still and serene as it wound through the valley. The sun had risen high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the trees and fields. Everything around her seemed at peace, and yet, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the edge of something. Something important. something that required her to confront the last remnants of her past before she could truly move forward. The dog stirred beside her, its soft whimper breaking the silence of the room. Anna reached down and gently scratched behind its ears, a small smile tugging at her lips as it leaned into her touch. The dog had become more than just a companion. It was a reminder of her strength, of the resilience she had discovered in herself when she had chosen to act, when she had dived into the river without a second thought to save it. But as much as the dog had helped her heal, there was still a part of her that felt fractured, still raw from the wounds of her past. She had learned how to survive, how to find peace in the quiet moments. But what Anna had yet to face was the heart of her own grief, the abandonment, the broken relationship, the overwhelming sense of being left behind. The emotional scars she had tried to bury had started to resurface, and she knew that, in order to heal completely, she would have to face them head on. The past few weeks had been a slow process of discovery for Anna. She had come to terms with the fact that healing wasn't a destination, but rather a journey, one that couldn't be rushed or forced. But as much as she had tried to find comfort in the peaceful life she had built here, there was a nagging feeling inside her that told her she needed to go back. She needed to return to the place where it all started, the place where her heart had been broken, the place where her journey toward healing truly began. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. It was about Anna, about confronting the parts of herself she had been running from for so long. She had been so focused on saving the dog, on rescuing it from the storm, that she had neglected to save herself in the process. The time had come for her to take that final step, to look into the mirror of her past and come to terms with what she had lost and what she had gained. She stood up slowly, the dog's eyes following her as she moved toward the door. Her heart beat a little faster, her body tense with anticipation. This wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the emotional confrontation that awaited her, but she knew it was something she had to do. It was time to face the source of her pain, to face the relationship that had ended so abruptly, so painfully, and to make peace with it. The dog padded quietly after her, its small paws making soft sounds against the wooden floor. Anna turned and knelt down, holding out her hand. The dog sniffed her palm, its tail wagging gently as if to reassure her that it was there, that it would stand by her no matter what. She smiled softly, grateful for its unwavering presence. It had been with her through so much already, and she knew it would be with her now, as she took this final step in her journey. The journey to the old house felt like a blur, an hour of winding roads and quiet contemplation. The familiar landscape of the valley passed by in a haze, and Anna found herself reflecting on how much had changed since the last time she had been here. She could still remember the way the house had felt when it was full of life, full of love, full of promises for the future. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the sound of laughter echoing through the halls, the warmth of hands intertwined. Those memories felt so far removed from the emptiness that had followed the breakup. As she pulled up to the driveway, her breath caught in her throat. The house looked the same, but everything about it felt different now. The heavy shutters that once protected the windows from the sun now hung open, letting in the light that illuminated the garden that had long since gone untended. The flowers that had once bloomed in vibrant colors were now faded and wilted, mirroring the state of the life she had left behind. It felt like stepping back into a memory, a place she had once known so well, but now it was foreign, empty. The dog, sensing her hesitation, whined softly from the passenger seat, its small eyes looking up at her with concern. Anna reached out and gently stroked its fur, taking a deep breath. This was the moment. She had to face it, had to confront everything that had happened here, and then let it go. She had survived the storm. Now she had to survive the quiet aftermath. Stepping out of the car, Anna felt the weight of her past pressing in on her once more. The door to the house creaked as she pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. The smell of dust and forgotten memories filled the air, and for a moment it was hard to breathe. She had spent so many years in this place, building a life she thought would last forever. But now it was just a hollow shell of what it had once been, a painful reminder of what she had lost. The silence was deafening. She walked slowly through the house, each step bringing her closer to the truth she had been avoiding. The living room, where they had spent countless evenings together, was dark and empty. The kitchen, once the heart of their home, was cold and abandoned. The photographs on the walls, of trips, of laughter, of love, now seemed like relics of a life that no longer existed. And then, as she reached the bedroom, she felt it. The weight of everything she had been running from. The pain of the breakup, the feeling of betrayal, the sharp sting of abandonment. But this time, it wasn't as crushing as it had been before. It was still there, yes, but now Anna saw it for what it was. Just another part of her story. It was a chapter she had lived through, a chapter that had shaped her, but it didn't have to define her. She walked to the window, looking out over the valley. The river, flowing calmly beneath the sky, was a reminder that life continued, that the storm had passed. There was still beauty, still hope. And as she looked down at the dog who had followed her into the room, she realized that it was time to close this chapter, to let go of the pain and to begin again. The dog nuzzled her leg, its small body pressing against hers in a gesture of quiet support. Anna smiled softly, her heart full. She wasn't alone anymore. She had the strength to face her past, to accept it, and to move forward. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready for whatever came next. With a final glance at the house that had once held so many memories, Anna turned and walked out, the dog following closely at her side. The past was behind her now. The future was waiting, and she was ready to face it, with the dog at her side, and a heart that had finally begun to heal. The journey back had felt like both an eternity and a fleeting moment, a blur of memories and emotions that rushed past Anna as she drove away from the house. The town, the streets, even the air seemed different now. They were all the same, yet they had shifted, transformed in her mind. It was as if her return to the house had opened a door to a new understanding of herself, one that was clearer and more grounded than before. The dog sat beside her in the car, its soft breath a comforting presence in the passenger seat. It had been with her through the worst, and now it was her companion on the road to healing. Just as it had been a companion in her healing process. She hadn't realized just how much it had become a part of her until now. In the silence of the drive, the dog seemed to mirror her own reflections, its eyes occasionally glancing up at her with quiet understanding. As she reached the outskirts of the town, and the familiar landscape of the valley opened up before her, Anna allowed herself a moment of peace. The wide expanse of fields and the distant mountains in the distance filled her with a sense of calm. There was something freeing about this place. The vastness of it, the openness of it all. It reminded her of the possibilities that lay ahead, of the fact that, while her past was a part of her, it no longer had to define her. She wasn't trapped in her memories anymore. She was free. The cottage had become a safe haven, a place where she could reconnect with herself, a place where she could feel the weight of her past and let it slowly slip away. But now, as she returned to it, she realized that it wasn't just the physical space that had become her refuge. It was her own mind, her own heart. She had come to terms with the fact that healing didn't come in grand moments or dramatic changes. It came in the quiet moments, the small decisions to move forward, the willingness to face the things she had hidden for so long. She had spent so many years carrying the burden of grief, of the broken relationship, of the emotional wounds that had never truly healed. But now, with every passing day, she felt those wounds begin to close, like scars that would eventually fade into nothingness. It wasn't an easy process. It wasn't without its challenges. There were days when the weight of everything would return, when the memories would come rushing back, threatening to pull her under. But she had learned how to deal with those days. She had learned that healing wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about embracing it, feeling it fully, and letting it pass. The dog's soft whine broke her reverie, and she glanced down at it, meeting its gaze. The dog had become more than just a companion. It was a reflection of herself, a small, fragile creature that had fought through the storm and had come out on the other side stronger, more resilient. She smiled, reaching down to gently scratch behind its ears. It licked her hand in return, and for a moment, Anna felt a wave of affection wash over her. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The house appeared on the horizon, and Anna's heart lifted in her chest. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was home. It was where she had rediscovered herself, where she had healed, and where she would continue to grow. She parked the car in the driveway, her fingers lingering on the steering wheel for a moment as she took a deep breath, gathering herself before stepping out. The dog hopped down eagerly, tail wagging, and Anna followed it, walking toward the front door. The world around her felt different. The trees, the fields, the sky, they all seemed brighter, more vivid, as if everything had shifted into focus. It was a new day, a new beginning. Inside, the cottage was just as she had left it, peaceful, quiet, and warm. She moved toward the kitchen, where the faint smell of herbs and fresh bread lingered in the air, a reminder of the life she had created here. The dog padded along behind her, its small paws making soft sounds on the wooden floor. She stood by the window, looking out over the valley once more. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The storm had passed and the sky was clearing. The river, once a symbol of everything that had torn her apart, was now a symbol of change, of the ebbs and flows of life. It had brought her to this place, to this moment, and while she had been terrified of it at first, she now saw it for what it was, a force of nature that could either destroy or renew. And she had chosen renewal. The dog lay down beside her, curling up on the rug, content and calm. Anna smiled down at it, her heart full. She had come to understand that healing wasn't about fixing everything all at once. It was about learning to live with the broken parts, accepting them, and growing stronger because of them. The dog had shown her that. With every wag of its tail, with every playful bounce, it was embracing life in all its imperfections. It wasn't waiting for the storm to be over. It was living, right now, in the present moment. Anna reached down and stroked the dog's fur, the simple act grounding her in the peace of the moment. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And in that moment, she realized something profound. She had been so focused on healing, on fixing the broken pieces of herself, that she had forgotten the importance of living in the present. She didn't need to wait for the past to be erased. She didn't need to wait for the perfect moment. She could live now. Her thoughts turned to the future, to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. There was still so much to explore, so much to learn. She wasn't sure where the road would take her, but she knew one thing for certain: she was ready. Ready to face the unknown, ready to embrace life, with all its beauty and challenges. And she was ready to share that journey with the dog, her loyal companion, who had taught her so much about resilience, trust, and the simple joy of being alive. Anna stood up, the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. She felt free, lighter than she had ever felt before. The future wasn't just a possibility. It was waiting for her, ready to unfold in its own time. The dog lifted its head, sensing her shift in energy, and trotted over to her. Anna bent down, scooping it into her arms. The dog licked her face in that familiar way, and Anna laughed softly, feeling the joy of the moment settle in her heart. Together they had made it through the storm. Together they would face whatever came next. With the dog in her arms, Anna walked out into the garden once more, looking up at the vast sky above. The horizon stretched out before her, full of endless possibilities, and for the first time she felt the excitement of what was to come. "Let's go," she whispered to the dog, her voice filled with quiet confidence. "There's so much out there waiting for us." And as they walked into the golden light of the setting sun, Anna realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where she no longer had to carry the weight of her past, but could embrace the future with open arms. The days had passed, each one blending seamlessly into the next, as Anna continued to find herself in the quiet rhythm of her life at the cottage. The sun would rise every morning, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the dog would be there beside her, its presence a constant source of comfort. Every day felt like a new beginning, an opportunity to move forward, to leave behind the pain of the past and embrace the peace that had come with healing. But even in the stillness, there was a lingering restlessness inside Anna. She had come so far, learned so much, and yet there was one final step she hadn't taken. A part of her had been avoiding it, holding back, unsure of whether she was truly ready to face the last chapter of her journey. The house, her old home, still haunted her thoughts, as if a piece of her soul remained there, stuck in the past, unable to move on. She had returned once to confront the ghosts of her memories, but she hadn't stayed long enough to fully heal from what had happened there. It was time to go back. Not to relive the past, but to close the door for good, to let go of the last remnants of what had been. Anna stood by the window, looking out at the valley once more. The sky was clear now, the river flowing peacefully in the distance, and the world around her seemed at peace. She felt a pang in her chest, a reminder that the past was still with her, still a part of her, but it was no longer a weight. It was a part of her story, a chapter that had shaped who she was. But it didn't have to define her. The dog sat beside her, its eyes watching her with a quiet understanding, as if it knew what was on her mind. Anna bent down and scratched its ears, feeling the warmth of its small body against her hand. "Are you ready for this, buddy?" she whispered, half to herself and half to the dog. The dog wagged its tail, looking up at her with those bright, trusting eyes. It had been with her through so much, through the storm and the struggle, and now, as they faced the last part of her healing journey, Anna knew she wasn't alone. The dog had shown her that there was more to life than just surviving. It was about living, truly living, despite the pain. With a deep breath, Anna stood up straight, the dog trotting behind her as she walked toward the door. She knew that this would be the hardest step yet, but it was one she needed to take. She couldn't move forward until she had faced the last of her demons, until she had given herself permission to fully let go. The drive to her old house felt different this time. There was no weight pressing down on her chest, no anxious knot in her stomach. The landscape passed by, the familiar roads, the same houses, and yet they felt new, as if she was seeing them with fresh eyes. The dog sat beside her, its small body relaxed, its head resting on her lap as it dozed quietly. Anna ran her fingers through its fur, grateful for its presence. It had become a symbol of resilience, of the quiet strength she had found in herself. As she neared the house, she felt a calmness settle over her. The house still stood, just as it had before, but there was no fear, no dread in her heart anymore. The past had shaped her, yes, but it no longer had the power to control her. She had done the work, had faced the memories, and now, it was time to close that door for good. Anna parked the car in the driveway, the dog hopping eagerly out of the car behind her. The house loomed before her, its once bright and welcoming exterior now faded and worn. The garden, once meticulously cared for, was overgrown with weeds, and the windows were dark, as if the life that had once filled this space had long since vanished. It was a silent reminder of everything she had lost, but also everything she had gained. She stood for a moment at the front door, taking in the stillness of the place. This had been her home, her sanctuary, the place where she had poured her heart into building a life, only to watch it all unravel. But today, it didn't feel like a place of loss anymore. It felt like a chapter closing, a finality that would allow her to truly move forward. The door creaked open as Anna stepped inside, the smell of dust and forgotten memories filling her senses. The space felt empty, the echoes of laughter and conversation long since faded. She moved through the house slowly, taking in each room, each corner. The living room, where they had spent countless evenings together, felt cold and distant now. The kitchen, once alive with the sounds of cooking and the aroma of meals shared, was silent and still. But Anna didn't feel the pain she had expected. She didn't feel the heartbreak she had thought would come rushing back. Instead, there was a sense of peace, of closure. The past was no longer something to be feared or avoided. It was simply a part of her story, a chapter she had lived through, and now it was time to let it go. She walked upstairs to the bedroom, where the memories had been the most vivid. The bed, once shared with her partner, was empty now, the space around it cold and still. Anna stood there for a long moment, looking at the empty room, feeling the weight of everything that had happened here. But as she stood there, something shifted inside her. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, they had all been valid, but they no longer needed to define her. She had survived this place, survived the heartache and the heartbreak, and now she was ready to move forward. With a deep breath, Anna turned away from the room and walked back downstairs. She knew what needed to be done. She had to let go. She had to close the door on this chapter, not just physically, but emotionally. This house, this life, had served its purpose. But it was time to move on, to let go of the past, and embrace the future with open arms. The dog trotted beside her as she stepped outside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She stood for a moment on the porch, looking out over the valley, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The past was no longer a burden. It was a part of her story, but it didn't define her. She was ready to move forward, to create a new life, a new chapter, one where she could finally be free. The dog nuzzled her hand as if to say, "We're in this together." Anna smiled, bending down to scratch its ears. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. With the dog by her side, Anna climbed into the car and started the engine, the hum of the motor a steady reminder that she was moving forward. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she felt ready for whatever came next. The past was behind her and the future was waiting. As the car pulled away from the house, Anna glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The house faded from view, disappearing into the distance, and she knew that it was the last time she would look back. She had closed the door, and now it was time to move on. The dog sat beside her, its head resting on her lap as it drifted into sleep. Anna's hands gripped the wheel, her heart full, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. The journey ahead was hers to create, and with each mile, she was leaving the past behind, ready to face whatever came next.